He was our leader and acted lovingly toward all. He would settle any dispute among us amicably. If by chance we found him absent for a day, we would go to his home and inquire about him. In his style and conduct, Merwan was simplicity itself. He did not have a tinge of pride and knew not what arrogance was. From childhood,
Can't hear you.
I think
he was straightforward and liberal, more conscious of others. He was devoid of family pride or craving for name, fame, respect, or honor. In his thinking, he was clean and pure, and from his boyhood, he shunned the contact of girls or women, keeping himself aloof from them. He was merciful toward any injured animal, and I remember once when he found a dead sparrow in his house, he buried it with an elaborate funeral service and prayers. He was always happy and cheerful and succumbed to the wishes of those who insisted on his complaints. I never saw him find fault with anyone, and his sincere dictum was that all, in one way or another, were good. He chose his friends who had a simple and candid nature. Rougher boys told him to shun these others' company, but he would turn a deaf ear to them and continue his association. The one defect in his character, if it could be called a defect, was that if he was upset or troubled, never in his life would he confide in us. Merwan is born 1903 to 1905. He would not open his heart to us and tell us what was on his mind. He also did not let any of us know of his suffering, and if he fell ill, he would suffer quietly and silently. On 31st August 1903, at the age of 9, Merwan entered the Pune camp government English school.
You know what,
He
Mona? Let me
attended the
interrupt you for a second,
school
Mona.
for 5 years. School.
Mona, your internet is going in and out. I think we're going to have to switch readers, and you should be hearing me.
Mona.
On the main
Mona.
street near what
Mona,
is
hold on, Mona.
stores. You want to read?
Mona, your
No.
internet is not good, so somebody else has to take over the reading. You're freezing on us. You're frozen now, as a matter of fact. Rosalie, you want to pick up?
Can we start? I'd like to have that recorded about Bailey and to know it was Bailey.
Yeah, this is part of Bailey. It's part from Bailey's diary. This is.
Can you put it down? I love that about Bailey to get it all again.
It starts right over here.
Because they didn't say Bailey. Oh, here it
Yeah.
is.
Bailey described Merwan's nature as follows.
Okay. Merwan was of a benevolent nature, and all his companions were extremely fond of him. He was our leader and acted lovingly toward all. He would settle any dispute among us amicably. If by chance we found him absent for a day, we would go to his home and inquire about him. In his style and conduct, Merwan was simplicity itself. He did not have a tinge of pride and knew not what arrogance was. From childhood, he was straightforward and liberal, more conscious of others' misery than his own. He was devoid of family pride or craving for name, fame, respect, or honor. In his thinking, he was clean and pure, and from his boyhood, shunned the contact of girls or women, keeping himself aloof from them. He was merciful toward any injured animal, and I remember once when he found a dead sparrow in his house, he buried it with an elaborate funeral service and prayers. He was always happy and cheerful and succumbed to the wishes of those who insisted on his compliance. I never saw him find fault with anyone, and his sincere dictum was that all, in one way or another, were good. He chose friends who had a simple and candid nature. Rougher boys told him to shun these others' company, but he would turn a deaf ear to them and continue his association. The one defect in his character, if it could be called a defect, was that if he was upset or troubled, never in his life would he confide in us. He would not open his heart to us and tell us what was on his mind. He also did not let any of us know of his suffering. And if he fell ill, he would suffer quietly and silently. On 31st August 1903, at the age of 9, Merwan entered the Pune Camp Government English School. He attended this school for 5 years. It was an all-boys school, a beautifully constructed building located on Main Street, near what is now Pune drugstores.
The school later became part of the Anglo-Urdu High School. Footnote.
It was an old school built by the British for students from the wealthier families of Pune and Bombay. Here, Merwan encountered older students and became a favorite of many. He had an outgoing, gregarious nature and was sympathetic and helpful to all. His companions loved him dearly and looked to him as their natural leader. He was such a favorite that many were eager to sit, eat, and play with him whenever they had a chance. Since he was so popular, several youngsters became jealous and, out of envy, formed a gang against Merwan and his comrades. Merwan, however, ignored their hostility, believing that today's enemies are tomorrow's friends, and he did not react to their antagonism. This group was led by Merwan's friend Bailey's older brother, Hormaz. Homie, as he was called, was a mean-spirited individual who would go out of his way to harass Merwan. Once, while playing field hockey at the school, Homie's team was beaten by Merwan's, and the angry boy deliberately struck Merwan on the shin with his hockey stick. Merwan's leg hurt intensely, and had it been anyone else, he would have fallen on the ground crying. However, Merwan not only took the blow without complaint, but also did not strike back. Homie was deeply impressed, and though outwardly he remained Merwan's enemy, inwardly he started to respect him. Merwan excelled in athletics at the Pune Camp School. When he won prizes in different games, he would always share them with his friends or teammates. As a boy, he was disciplined. He had fixed times for his studies reading and games from which he would seldom deviate. He would rise early and, after his ablutions, would pray aloud in a melodious voice. Mewan had been gifted with an exquisite singing voice. The neighbors would also rise early just to hear him sing. When he sang, it seemed as if the rippling waters of a river of poetry were flowing by. The boy's singing and the clarity of his notes affected every heart that was fortunate enough to hear him. After prayers, Mewan would have his breakfast and go to school. From childhood, Mewan was devoutly religious. Like all faithful Zoroastrians, he would attend his local Agiri, how do you say that, Agiri or Agiri?
Agiari.
Agiari,
Agiari. Yeah, that's what I think.
yeah, fire temple with his parents. And the priests were impressed by the youngster's devotion. Footnote.
The fire temple located nearest to the family's residence was the Kadmi and Shenshahi Anjuman Agiari in the Khorshid Wadi area of the camp. The locals called the fire temple the Kamda Agiari because of the crowing cock on the weather vane on top of the building. Not so important.
Mewan and Jamshed's Navjot, sacred thread ceremony, was performed before a gathering of Pune Zoroastrians when Mewan was about 10 years old. Yet the boy was not drawn to the ceremonial atmosphere of the fire temple and used to thumb rapidly through the pages of the prayer book, hoping the service would end soon. Mewan, however, seemed to innately understand the meaning of true spirituality, as evidenced by these words spoken to his friends when he was just 12. Every soul lives in the world only for a short time, and when it is our time to leave this world, we go empty-handed. We do not know in the least at what moment we will make our departure from the caravanserai. But sooner or later, we have to go, leaving everything dear to us. In spite of knowing this, it is sheer foolishness to be attached to this world and its possessions and hold to them at all costs. It is meant for us to make good our short-lived and momentary existence, which we can do by following the teachings of our prophet, Zoroaster. If we strictly carry out the tenets of our religion, good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, our life will be a success. And by freeing ourselves from this life's toils, we will enjoy quite a different life. Mewan then composed these lines. This world is ephemeral, the soul eternal. That world is everlasting, the soul immortal. Its conduct is indestructible, its love incomparable. Oh, pilgrims, stretch your feet on this holy path. Do your utmost to realize eternity. Then only will you be happy in both worlds. Mewan loved his parents deeply. He would obey them and conscientiously carry out their words of advice. If he somehow happened to overlook their counsel, he would immediately seek their pardon. And unless they forgave him, he would not feel at ease. When he was young, as per the custom of the time, every morning Mewan would approach his parents and respectfully bow down to touch the feet of his mother and then his father.
Okay, thank you, Rosalie. That was a pretty amazing statement from a 12-year-old, huh?
So beautiful. Yeah.
Okay, can we have another reader? Marion, would you like to read?
All right, thank you. And where is it start?
Oh,
Right at the top here.
At the top, all right.
excuse me, folks. Just a suggestion for next time, Marvin. Start your recording before sharing your screen.
Yeah, gotcha.
Hi, Eugene.
Thank you. Hey there, kids.
Okay. Okay,
Sorry to interrupt.
Good point.
so continuing, shall I go ahead?
All right, go ahead, please.
Okay. And every night before retiring, he would do the same. Even when he rose earlier than his parents, he would approach their bed as they slept and touch their feet gently without disturbing them. He considered this act of respect a sacred duty. Merwan was exceedingly loving and obedient toward his parents, and Bobo and Memo felt happy and reciprocated Merwan's love. In fact, they loved their Merog more than their other children and did not hide the fact. Bobo especially loved Merwan profoundly and deeply appreciated the boy's virtuous nature. Bobo had known from the time of Merwan's birth that he was the son of whom the divine voice had spoken. At times, when acquaintances would approach Bobo about his son's future, he would declare, "I believe my son is from God, so his future must lie with God. God will reveal Merwan's destiny." Of course, Bobo's friends knew of his dervish past and would not rebuke him, though they may not have understood. Memo did not think of Merwan's future in the same manner. Her thoughts were more worldly, wanting for him a good profession, wife, and children. Merwan's temperament was mild yet straightforward. He would never deceive or lie to anyone. In cases where telling the truth injured the feelings of others, he would avoid speaking. He was not abrasive and would not deliberately insult anyone, even if provoked. As Bailey pointed out, his unique characteristic was that he always kept his troubles to himself, even with his parents. Imperceptibly, every action of Merwan's from his childhood echoed and amplified the notes of the divine song that were resounding in him. The gait of his swift, graceful stride, like that of a deer, some said, was in itself a reverberating, contagious hymn, a contagious rhythm, an alluring dance of his spirit's quick tempo. Merwan's cheerful companionship spread joy and delight every moment, dispelling any sadness others felt. Laughter and joy were always visible on his beautiful and attractive face, wrote Bailey. Besides, it is impossible to express in words the magical charm in his Mudbari Mastan, intoxicating eyes. Merwan stole the hearts and minds of everyone in their very first visit by his strong, short-statured body, broad shoulders, and loving, melodious voice. Those who knew Merwan at that time have described him as someone who was generous to the poor and compassionate to the downtrodden, a boy of good moral conduct, a good student, a good sportsman, a respectful son, a model child, an excellent singer, an idealist, a lover of poetry, a possessor of a gifted mind, a pragmatist, and above all, soft-hearted. He was admired by many, but the chief reason for each one's attraction, unbeknownst to any except his father, was the reverberation within him of the song, which underscored everything Merwan said or did. Age observed, From his birth, this boy was quite different from others. In the eyes of the world, Merwan appeared normal, yet whoever met him felt a luminosity not of this world. How could Merwan be regarded as a normal person? Perfection was personified in him, yet he himself was still unconscious of it. Merwan's purity of character in particular had an effect on his friends. As Bailey noted, from Merwan's childhood, his actions and thoughts were so pure that everyone around him would get such feelings continuously in his presence. Young children, however, disrespectful and misbehaving they may be otherwise, would naturally behave well and respectfully in his presence. Even I, being one of the bad boys, would always give full respect and never dared to utter a single bad word in his presence. Although a cheerful and lively atmosphere was always maintained around Merwan through laughter, fun, and jokes, etc., it was of an innocent nature. If by mistake or unconscious action someone were to utter any bad words or use foul language in his presence, he would very sternly warn them in such a manner that the concerned person would not dare to repeat such behavior. As mentioned, Bailey's older brother, Homie, took every opportunity to tease and torment young Merwan. Consequently, Homie and Bailey would often fight. Bailey also had a tempestuous nature. Sometimes in defense of his friendship with Merwan, Bailey injured others by word or deed. If they complained to Merwan, Bailey was furious because he could not bear a word of reprimand from his best friend. Yet, if others criticized Bailey for his shortcomings, he did not pay attention to them. Bailey himself wondered why he became so submissive to Merwan. It bothered him, and on different occasions, he would confront Merwan on this point. But no sooner did he stand before Merwan than his resolve would disappear. Memo did not like Bailey, thinking him to be a bad influence. She would scold Merwan. "That boy is no good. The sooner you give up his company, the better. Stop seeing him. I don't want him to come to this house." Merwan, in this instance, did not care what his mother said.
Okay, thank you, Marion. And let's have another reader, please. Any volunteers? I don't see any other faces right now. I'll take over for now. He would patiently bear her abusive words. It became a daily exchange of words between mother and son, since Merwan and Bailey maintained their friendship. Bailey was unaware of this situation until Jamshed told him privately about it. Although Merwan tolerated his mother's constant scolding, Bailey could not bear to see his best friend in trouble with his mother. Bailey met with Merwan and expressed his intention to end their friendship. But Merwan was displeased and said, "If this is the reason for your breaking of our friendship, then you will be proving your own weakness by doing so. If you want to break our friendship, then go. I cannot stop you from what you think. But remember, we part as friends. I was your friend, and I shall always be your friend. In the future, if the occasion arises for you to want to see me, if need be, I shall come and meet you. Just send word through Jamshed or anyone else." Bailey replied, "It is your goodness to express such words, Merwan. But don't you understand why I have decided to sacrifice our friendship?" "Of course I understand that you are sacrificing yourself, but you have no idea what a sacrifice I am making by allowing you to break our friendship. You want to save me from the tongue lashings of my mother, but you do not care how deeply your words strike me. You have hurt me by breaking our friendship." The two boys then made amends and kept their friendship. It was arranged, however, that to keep peace at Merwan's home, they would meet secretly so as not to draw the notice of Memo's spies, especially Merwan's younger brother Jal. During this period, Merwan's family was residing behind his father's tea shop. Since Bailey had to rise early to fetch milk for his household, he would first meet Merwan surreptitiously, then attend to his errands. He would ride to Merwan's house and ring his bicycle bell. Hearing it, Merwan would immediately come out, and they would converse quietly. Everyone in the house was still asleep at this early hour, except for Bobo, who would be working to open the tea shop. However, Shariarji did not mind the boys meeting. Merwan would already be up and bathed by the time Bailey arrived. He was an early riser and would be chanting his morning Persian prayers. Bailey was captivated by Merwan's beautiful voice, and he always made sure he was early so that he would be able to hear Merwan sing. He never forgot the sound of that singing. Quote, the melodious sounds of his prayers would strike my eardrums from a long distance, Bailey recollected. It would create unique waves in my soul. As I drew nearer and nearer, the sounds would create more and more uncommon experiences in my heart. End quote. The boys also walked together to school. Bailey continues. I would be waiting eagerly outside my house, and Merwan would come and fetch me, and we would go to school together. Of course, other boys too would join us on the way, and we would have a good time joking, merrymaking, etc. In the evening also, Merwan and I would return together. If ever Merwan was late in leaving, I would wait for him. And if I was late due to punishment by about half an hour to an hour, Merwan would be waiting for me. With care, he would ask me the reason for the punishment and would give me sound advice. At such times, I would bow my head in shame and listen to what he had to say without uttering a single word. After tea and snacks in the evening, we would spend the time together in the company of other boys playing at the Gymkhana, the club in the school's compound, or at Boot Maiden. Before dusk, we would all return home. If at times I would not listen to anyone at home or behave stubbornly, insisting on my way, show anger, arrogance, or become quarrelsome, my mother would somehow manage to send a message to Merwan secretly without my knowing and complain to him about me. I had to listen to Merwan's advice with lowered head and soften my behavior with all in the family. One morning there was a communal feast at the Zoroastrian fire temple, and all the Zoroastrian boys were let out of school an hour before lunch to participate. After the feast, there was plenty of time before school resumed for the afternoon. Merwan and his friends started playing a rough game, which one player which had one player on the ground who was the hunter, protecting his base. The others climbed atop the wall surrounding the temple or the high trees in the compound. The object of the game was for the hunter to pursue and tag one of the boys before the others could leap down from the walls or trees and scramble to the base. In the course of the game, several of the boys got cuts and bruises. Merwan was seated on the edge of the wall with his feet dangling over the side. The hunter climbed the wall as he chased one of the other boys who escaped. Then the hunter lost his balance and bumped into Merwan from behind, knocking him to the ground. Merwan's head struck a stone, causing a deep 2-inch gash on his forehead. He started crying and was rushed to a doctor who was unable to stop the bleeding. Although different physicians attended him, the bleeding continued for 3 days. On the third day, a physician applied one last remedy and warned Shariarji, your son's condition is grave. If the bleeding continues, the boy must be moved to a hospital. The bleeding finally stopped after the third night. The physician was surprised and told Bobo the next day, your son has been given a new lease on life. I did not want to tell you, but I was convinced he would not survive. For some time thereafter, Merwan suffered the pain of the wound, and even though the bandage was removed, he continually complained of headaches and weakening sight. Memo was afraid that he would gradually lose his eyesight, and she forbade him to read or write. Finally, after 3 months, the headaches went away and Merwan's vision returned to normal. The boy who had accidentally knocked Merwan off the wall was Jal Dinshaw Nicholson. Merwan and Jal Nicholson had a high regard for each other. When Merwan saw him after he had recovered, he shook Jal's hand and showed him the gash, indicating that he was not to blame for what had happened. Jal was a brilliant student who later attended the same college as Merwan. And the footnote says that Jal eventually went to England to pursue his studies, where he died while still a young man. After his accident, Merwan no longer played the game of the hunter and pursued sports instead. He successfully formed and captained a field hockey team of his friends and classmates, with hopes that other teams would be formed and matches played. However, on the first day, the hockey ball, coincidentally hit by Jal Nicholson, injured one of the boys on the leg and he fell to the ground. Merwan took the injured player to be treated. He felt personally responsible because this particular boy had been told by his elder brother, a lawyer, not to join the team. Merwan had prevailed on his friend to play that day when the brother was out of town. And maybe someone else would like to read here?
I can read.
All right, go ahead, Rosalie.
After he was injured, Merwan explained the situation to the brother who forgave him. That was the first and last day of the field hockey team. Merwan was not discouraged and next formed a soccer team. He received financial support from a good friend whose father was a leading merchant. Soccer practice went well for some time, but one day the same wealthy friend who was acting as goalie tried to catch the ball and badly injured his finger. Merwan wrapped his finger in a wet cloth and took him to a nearby Christian doctor who treated the injury. Then he escorted the boy home. After this incident, the soccer team was also disbanded, and Merwan decided not to form any other teams. One of Merwan's neighborhood friends, Kodu Irani, was also a student in the Pune camp school. Kodu was a husky athlete who enjoyed Merwan's company, even though he was a few years older than Merwan. One evening, Merwan, his brother Jamshed, and a group of boys were playing in the lane near their house. Jamshed and Kodu started quarreling and ended up wrestling on the ground. Kodu, who had the better of Jamshed, slapped him angrily and then ran off. Merwan had tried his best to prevent them from coming to blows, but Jamshed had a bad temper and would not listen. Kodu mistakenly thought Merwan had been taking his brother's side, and in anger had landed the first blow. As Kodu ran away, he turned to look back. Merwan, seeing this, picked up a stone and throwing it, struck Kodu directly in the genitals. Kodu fell down crying in pain. Both Merwan and Jamshed were alarmed, and Jamshed ran into the house to inform their mother, leaving Merwan to aid Kodu. Fortunately, upon Merwan's inquiry, Kodu told him that the injury was not serious and that there was nothing to worry about. Both then explained their points of view, afterward shaking hands and remaining friends. Usually, whenever quarrels arose among the boys, Merwan was the one who would pacify both sides and reestablish a feeling of amity. He did this in such a manner that all concerned would then forget about the dispute. Another of Merwan's close friends was a Christian boy named Louis Vegas, who was also strong and a good athlete. Lewis was very fond of Merwan and, like Bailey, was fiercely loyal to him. Lewis had a courageous spirit and was generous and kind. He feared no one, not even the older boys. Lewis had little interest in his studies, but because he was intelligent, he would always manage to pass his courses. He was quick-witted, humorous, and had much fun with Merwan. One day, a fight broke out between two Irani boys. Merwan tried to stop them from slugging each other, but the two boys were so angry he could not prevent the fist fight. As they rolled on the ground fighting, Lewis yelled, "Are you going to listen to Merwan or not? Otherwise, I will knock both your blocks off." Frightened by Lewis's threat, the boys stopped fighting, though they were still seething within. Then, in his soothing fashion, as only he could do, Merwan prevailed upon them to forgive each other and be friends again. The boys embraced, and their mutual adolescent anger and bitterness subsided. As mentioned, many of the boys would often come to Merwan to settle any dispute. If, despite Merwan's attempts to diffuse the situation, they kept fighting, Merwan would summon two larger boys who were muscular wrestlers as his enforcers. Usually the threat to call in these enforcers was enough to stop the boys from fighting. Footnote.
But Baba himself narrated this story to the author.
Merwan developed a large circle of friends and acquaintances. He was neither an elitist nor did he pay importance to the respect given to him. Even though older boys in the upper classes also esteemed him, in some ways, Merwan was even then venerated. However, he realized at a young age that God did not accept an egotist. It was said that Merwan inherited his father's good-natured, saintly temperament. Shariarji was highly regarded as a person and as a businessman of great integrity and unquestionable honesty. In his youth, Merwan would often sit on the doorsteps of his house, gazing at the stars and moon for hours. At times, his friends would join him, but he would become so absorbed that he would seemingly lose himself, neither replying to their questions nor sharing in their conversation. Late night and early morning were the best opportunities for Bailey to be with Merwan, since, as mentioned previously, Memo did not like him. In those days, very few people were on the street after dark, Bailey explained. At such times of complete quietude and peace, Merwan and I would meet at 9 o'clock and continue to talk till midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning and pass our time in this manner. Bailey would ask Merwan what he saw in the sky. Merwan would sometimes reply cryptically, "I saw the court of Emperor Jamshed of Persia." Other times he answered, "I saw the peacock throne." Once he said, "I saw the formless God in form." After these comments, he would laugh, and Bailey would be annoyed, thinking Merwan was not being entirely candid. Bailey recorded, "During such times, Merwan would tell me about God, his creation, the laws of nature, and its importance. At times, he would speak about the spiritual status of saints, Mahatmas, and their miracles, and at other times, about the profoundness and greatness of the Zoroastrian religion, and the important tenets of other religions. He would explain all this to me with simplicity and beauty, but I had absolutely no interest in all such matters. I would interject with a few uhs now and then, and I would ask him an occasional question just to please him. During one such meeting, Merwan kept straining his eyes, staring intently at a spot on the moon. And he pointed out the image of Zoroaster standing in front of a brightly lit sacred fire. I joked, if you continue to stare at the moon like this, one day you will land yourself in Yaravda madhouse. Merwan responded, whoops, wait a minute. Merwan responded immediately. Bailey, this world is also a madhouse. Swami Vivekananda has said the same thing, and it is true. The whole world is a lunatic asylum. Some are mad after money, some after fame, etc. So I too am mad, but this type of madness is different, better than any other. It is the highest and the best type of madness. Merwan was not superstitious, except at an early age about cats, due to his grandmother's influence, and often spoke to Bailey of spirits and ghosts. He told Bailey, not all spirits are evil. Some are, in fact, quite good. Such good spirits, however, are few in number and can only be seen by those who scrupulously follow the tenets of their religion. Only the pious see these spirits. Merwan then described Shariarji's experiences to his friend. When my father was a boy, he was the caretaker of the Tower of Silence in his hometown in Persia. Bobo told me he used to see many spirits while he guarded the dead. Their presence was a common sight to my father, and he was not at all afraid of them and was never harmed by them. He told me that in their spirit form, the good ones look just like humans. The bad ones look like humans also, but with their feet reversed. Their heels are in front of their legs with the toes at the back.
All right, thanks, Rosalie. Rainey, would you like to read?
Yes, okay. I'm settled. I'll just get my microphone. One second.
That's been confirmed by people, by Erico Nadel, that he'd see spirits and they'd have their feet on backwards, and he knew that they weren't good ones.
Sorry, here we go. Oh, there we go. Merwan is born in 1908, 129. Bobo also told me that departed souls and spirits gathered at the Tower of Silence and held meetings at night. One day when Merwan was 12 years old, eager to observe one of these spirit sessions and to prove the truth of his father's tales, he told his friend about his plan to visit the Pune Tower of Silence at night. Bailey was thrilled with Merwan's idea, since he too was curious and fascinated by spirits. He confidently declared himself not afraid of anyone or anything. Bailey suggested they choose a night when the moon was full, but Merwan disagreed, arguing that a dark night was better. They fixed a date, and Merwan said, "Bailey, I want you to promise me that you will do as I tell you. I don't want any of your daredevilry." Bailey promised. One moonless night, the two boys slipped out of their houses to make their way in the dark to the last resting place of Zoroastrians. The Tower of Silence was situated on a hill 2 miles from the city. Even during the daytime, it presented a haunting and forbidding appearance. Surrounding the stone walls was a forested area. It was about midnight by the time they arrived at the tower compound, but Merwan showed no fear. Before they entered the compound, Merwan said, "Bailey, I must again insist that you promise that whatever happens, we both stick together. We have to keep silent as we climb the tower steps, and we must not turn back for home without first offering our obeisance there. We will say our prayers and then return." And again, Bailey promised. Merwan continued, "I want you to promise that whatever spirits we see, we will climb silent. We will. I want you to promise that whatever spirits we see, we will remain silent so we don't draw anyone's attention to us. When we climb the steps, we pray the whole way." And Bailey agreed, though he knew only 2 or 3 short prayers from the Avesta, the Zoroastrian scriptures, and was starting to feel dubious. But Merwan reminded him of his promise, and they started towards the tower. The moment the tower was in sight, Merwan kneeled, placing his head on the ground, and offered his prayer. He remained like that for quite a while, and Bailey imitated him. The caretakers of the place had left, and the boys saw no one around. They heard no voices, but there was the distant barking of dogs and foxes and the fluttering of vultures' wings nearby. Slowly but surely, the dreadful silence and solemnity of the place had its effect on Bailey. Shivers passed up and down his spine, and he implored Merwan to go back home. "What's the matter?" Merwan said. "Why should we go back? We have come this far. Let's see what's here." "But I am beginning to feel that perhaps this was not such a good idea." Bailey's voice quivered. Merwan was annoyed and replied, "Why aren't you wearing bangles?" "Why are you wearing bangles?" "Be a man. Come, I will lead. Stay near me. There is nothing to be afraid of." They walked farther and came to the door of the tower through which the corpses were taken. No one except the Zoroastrian priests were allowed to enter. Again, Merwan bent low and offered his obeisance, and Bailey did the same. But upon rising, he was frightened out of his wits when he saw a thin, tall, aged-looking spirit dressed in white with a flowing white beard. The spirit stretched out his hands, his palms held towards them as if warning them to stop. Bailey was so terror-stricken that he shut his eyes tightly and started perspiring as his knees buckled. Opening his eyes slightly, he saw Merwan proceeding to the door. He could not contain his fear any longer, and he cried out loudly, "Merwan!" hoping to stop him. But as if led by some force, Merwan kept walking. Bailey was frightened. He could not turn back. Bailey was so frightened that he could not turn back. He ran to Merwan and clutched the side of his coat and pleaded him to leave. Merwan halted, and Bailey began and beseeched him, "Let's not go any farther." But Merwan was obstinate. "No, let's go on." And in a weak voice, Bailey spoke, "Whatever may happen, Merwan, I'm not prepared to take another step. You must come back with me." "But why?" said Merwan. "Why are you trying to stop me?" Bailey could only utter, "I have seen something," and his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. "So what?" "Oops. So what? That is why we've come here," Merwan responded. "If you are afraid of seeing things, stop now and I'll go on alone." Bailey burst out, "If anything happens to you, I cannot be held responsible by your parents." "My parents have not put me in your care," Merwan retorted. "They don't even know I have come here with you. So how could they hold you responsible? Don't worry, go. Even if I die, fend for yourself." Bailey pleaded, "Merwan, have pity. You can come again any time you like. Don't be so stubborn. come back next time alone, but for my sake, please let's go out of here. This softened Merwan's heart, and agreeing to leave, he again offered his situation to the dead.
Salutation.
He again offered his salutation to the dead, with Bailey doing likewise as they crept out. Bailey glanced at the spot where he had seen the spirit form and was glad it had disappeared. Finally, they descended the steps, and Bailey offered his thanks to God. Near the city, he sighed with relief, but then made some boastful remarks. Merwan started to tease him. So, my brave comrade, have you now experienced the beings of the subtle world? Say what you like, Bailey said, but had you been alone and had the experience I did, I cannot say what your state would have been. I was able to withstand that sight to some extent, but I doubt whether you would have been able to stand it. What did you say? Merwan asked. What else could I have seen except an old bearded man dressed in white guarding the door with outstretched hands? You saw him too, Bailey asked, his heart palpitating. I believe so, Bailey, but now I cannot be sure, Merwan teased. Stop kidding and tell me honestly whether you saw that spirit or not, Bailey replied, irritated. Bailey, you really are thick-headed. Don't you understand that I'm saying I saw exactly what you saw? And still you wanted to go on, Merwan, without fearing what was on the other side? What was there to be afraid of? Was there anyone else around but that spirit? Merwan asked. I want to know more about the form you saw. Were there more spirits? Bailey, you disappoint me. I believe with the loss of your courage, you have lost your common sense as well. Bailey's feelings were hurt, and Merwan consoled him. My dear friend, had I felt the least bit frightened, would I have agreed to go there in complete darkness? If I were afraid, then why did I bind you with these promises? I also would have tried to turn back like you. Believe me, I didn't go there to die. Bailey felt better and asked, all right, but tell me, how long did you really see the form?
Okay, Rainey, thank you. Marian, would you like to pick up from here?
I would like to read today.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Michal, your turn.
Okay. It was there for only a few seconds and then faded away. Bailey asked again. Did you keep on gazing at the old man, or did you look away? I had no reason to turn my eyes. I kept looking at him until he disappeared. Bailey persisted to satisfy his curiosity. But suppose if you had gone through the door and the form again appeared, would you have been able to stand it? Of course, why not? Replied Merwan. It was not an evil spirit. He was a pious spirit, which I could see by his appearance. He was not there to harm us, so what was there to fear? I told you before that my father explained that such spirits do not harm, but on the contrary, they protect. My father told me it is therefore necessary to meet such spirits to gain their favor. To what end? Asked Bailey. To benefit spiritually, Merwan replied. This convinced Bailey of the courageousness of his friend, and he expressed his respect. Afterward, he requested, Merwan, please do not tell our friends that I was scared I would lose face. Merwan replied, all right, as long as you are straightforward with me, I won't tell anyone. The clock of the nearby Lal Devi Red Synagogue struck 2 as the boys parted company. They had spent about 3 hours wandering in the night. Although this was Bailey's first and last visit to the tower at night, he later found out that Merwan had been a frequent visitor there before this incident. As if drawn by some strange force, Merwan would often go to the Tower of Silence from about 10 until midnight. After the experience with Bailey, he continued to go there alone to sit for several hours. It is said that he saw many other good and pious spirits, thus gathering experiences similar to his father's. Merwan had always been drawn to solitary places and derived such profound peace from these hours alone that at times he would joyously sing to himself. During his school vacations, Merwan would usually go to Lonavla to stay with maternal uncle and aunt, Faridun Masa and Daula Masi, and his brother Jamshed. Merwan's uncle was a guileless man, innocent as a child, and Merwan loved him dearly. One night, while Merwan was visiting Faridun Masa, when Merwan was visiting, Faridun Masa got up in the middle of the night to urinate. You remember this one, don't you? Moments later, Merwan also woke for the same purpose. Both went outside to the compound's urinal, but they did not see each other in the pitch dark. Standing outside with his trousers unbuttoned, Faridun Masa saw the shadow of a figure emerge from the house. He did not know it was Merwan and became afraid, thinking it was an intruder, and called out to Daula Masi to come. Not knowing his uncle was outside, Merwan, thinking he was hearing a ghost or a robber, also cried out for Daula Masi, though he was actually not afraid. Their shouts awakened her, and she brought a lantern. She found Farid Masa and Merwan in their underwear on opposite sides of the courtyard. Everyone laughed at the situation, and later the incident was humorously recorded many times. Recounted many times. Yeah.
The incident in Lonavla was also told to the author by Baba.
Daula Masi and Faridun Masa owned a successful restaurant in Lonavla. It was noticed that every time Merwan visited, a masked, God-intoxicated person and a wali, a saint, would come to the restaurant. The rugged masked would stay seated outside, while the neatly dressed wali would enter. Both advanced souls were venerated by the townspeople, and both lived on the outskirts of the town, seldom leaving their spiritual seats. Yet no sooner would Merwan arrive in Lonavla than both would appear at the restaurant and remain daily from morning until night. The local people tried to offer the masked and wali tea or food, but they would accept things only from the young boy. Merwan would usually give the wali tea and the masked a loaf of bread. On the day Merwan would return to Pune, both spiritual personages would stop coming to the restaurant, much to the curiosity of the local observers. One of the restaurant's regular customers was a curiosity in himself, a hunchback Muslim who was a superb storyteller. The clientele would often press him for a tale, listening enthralled to his stories of adventure and fantasy, plying him with tea and bidis, hand-rolled cigarettes, far into the night. Often a single story would take a whole week. Merwan was fascinated with strange hunchback and would always listen to his tales. Merwan also loved to hike in the dense hilly forest surrounding Lonavla. He usually roamed alone. Sometimes Merwan would visit Bombay and spend part of his vacation with his other maternal aunt and uncle, Banu Masi and her husband, Khodadad Masa, and their children. Khodadad Masa managed several flourishing tea shops in Bombay, and they lived in a large house with a spacious compound where the children played. Merwan's paternal uncle, Khodadad Kaka, and members of his family had also settled in Bombay, and Merwan would visit them as well, befriending Khodadad Kaka's sons. After some time, Daula Masi, Faridun Masi, and Jamshed moved back to Pune for Jamshed's high school education. Here too, the couple opened a restaurant. Jamshed, though he had lived apart from his parents for some years, always felt very close to his younger brother. From the time they were babies, the two brothers had been raised more like twins. For example, whenever it was Jamshed's birthday, Daula Masi would insist that Merwan receive the same gifts, such as an identical suit of clothes, so that whenever any new toy or gift was brought for one, the other brother would receive the same as well. Once during the kite flying season in Pune, Merwan, Jamshed, and several of their friends went to watch the spectacle of dozens of kites being flown in the nearby field. As described previously, the strings of the kites were coated with glass so that when they were maneuvered across each other in the sky, one string would cut the string of another kite. Whoever retrieved the fallen kite could claim ownership. The moment the kite started falling, there would be an excited scramble as the boys ran towards it. On this particular day, many children had gathered and were watching the competition intensely, eagerly awaiting the running dash for the falling kite. Soon, one kite's string was cut and it started spiraling down from the sky. Merwan and his friends ran toward it, along with several other boys. But in the midst of their scramble, Merwan, who was in the lead, suddenly halted and asked, "Where's my brother?" The boys replied, "Oh, he is somewhere behind. Come on, Merwan, let's go." Concerned, Merwan again implored, "Where's my brother?" But Jamshed was nowhere to be seen in the wide field. Merwan said, "We must go back and find Jamshed." The others agreed and began to retrace their steps. While they had been running, Jamshed had stumbled into an open sewer hole and was clinging to the edge. He was so frightened he could not even shout for help. When Merwan and his friends found Jamshed, they were able to pull him out.
Okay, thank you, Michal. Would anyone who hasn't read yet like to read now? All right, then why don't we go back to Mary Ann now?
All right.
Marion, I could read before you read. Rest
Okay.
up a little bit more.
Let's
Yeah.
go then.
That's good. That's good.
All right,
Um,
Mr. Bunny, take
While
over.
they have been running, sorry?
Fortunately, right at the top. You see?
Whoops. Oh, I'm sorry, I've lost the place. I don't see any paragraphs starting with fortunately.
Why don't you look on the screen?
I don't know if
Oh,
you
because
can.
I'm looking at my own download.
Okay.
How about if I start from the sewage spoiled Jamshed's clothing?
Fine, you're only missing one sentence. I'll read it. Fortunately, they were just in time as the municipality was about to release a torrent of water through the sewer and Jamshed could have drowned. Okay, go ahead.
I see. The sewage spoiled Jamshed's clothing, and he arrived home foul smelling and soaking wet. Upon seeing him, Memo scolded him sharply. Jamshed started crying, which made Memo even more upset. She made Jamshed stay outside, refusing to permit him to enter the house in his filthy condition during dinner time. Merwan, feeling sorry for his brother, inconspicuously went outside with several buckets of water and washed all of Jamshed's clothing himself. Although Jamshed and Merwan loved each other, the two, like most brothers, would also fight. Jamshed was hot-tempered and rash by nature. Merwan was not aggressive and seldom expressed anger. Both had been pampered. Jamshed by Daulamasi and Merwan by Memo. But Merwan never acted spoiled. Jamshed had a wicked tongue, and the boys frequently disagreed. When Jamshed lost control of his anger, Merwan would not say a word, but would ignore him. Merwan's indifference enraged Jamshed even more and caused a bigger ruckus. Jamshed feared his mother's frequent scolding and punishment, so the elder brother would refrain from picking on his younger brother if Memo were home. At times, Merwan would even accept the punishment for his older brother's mischief, as this incident from Bailey reveals. It so happened that once Merwan's mother told his elder brother Jamshed, whom we called Jam, to make some purchases from the cantonment market, and Jamshed asked Merwan to accompany him. Merwan was absorbed in his studies and was disinclined to go, but his brother persisted, so he agreed. Jamshed, who had a rough nature, was not in the mood to go shopping and was upset that his mother insisted he do this errand. On the way, Jamshed collided with a smaller Muslim boy, and both of them started arguing about who was at fault. Merwan tried to pacify them, but in the heat of the moment, the Muslim boy uttered a particular word of abuse, which made Jamshed lose his temper. Without regarding the consequences, he slapped the boy across the face and was about to do so again when Merwan intervened by thrusting the Muslim boy aside and taking the slap himself. As soon as Jamshed's hand touched Merwan's face, he calmed down and they continued to the market. A crowd had gathered on the road and witnessed how Merwan took the slap in defense of the smaller boy. This was the quality of character possessed by Merwan at the age of 10. But the incident did not end there. After Merwan and Jamshed had returned home, the Muslim boy brought his mother and a few neighbors and sought out Shireen Mai. Her name was yelled out, and she rushed to the street, followed by Merwan. The Muslim boy's face was bruised, and his mother wanted a word of apology. When asked who had beaten him, the boy pointed to Merwan. Merwan took it calmly and offered his apology in the presence of all the neighbors and passers-by gathered there, and the Muslim boy and his mother left, satisfied. The accusation did not perturb Merwan. On the contrary, he seemed to enjoy it by the reaction on his face. He was smiling as he apologized. Shireen Mai, however, did not believe it and knew instinctively that Merwan had been a scapegoat for Jamshed. Afterwards, Shireen Mai scolded Jamshed and warned him to stop fighting. So Jamshed and Merwan looked very similar, I think, from my point of view when I looked at his pictures. A third brother, Bairam, was born on 20th June 1908, when Merwan was 14 years old. Bairam would grow up to be a sweet-natured individual and took after Merwan, while their brother Jal was similar to Jamshed in temperament. Both Jamshed and Merwan knew that Jal was Memo's informant, and they avoided trouble when he was around. On Monday, the 4th of January, 1909, Merwan began attending the all-boys Roman Catholic St. Vincent's High School, considered the best secondary school in Pune. It was run by Christian missionaries, and most of the boys were from wealthier families. But boys of all castes and faiths were admitted. Unusual for a Catholic school, religious instruction was not mandatory. Discipline, however, was strict, and punishment for any mischief meant strokes with a cane. At St. Vincent's High School, Merwan, now 15, entered the 6th standard and came into contact with new teachers and friends. By the way, the school was named after the French saint Vincent de Paul, who did much work with the poor. So he came into contact with new teachers and friends. Gradually, he started to like the school, and as in the Puna Camp School, he became a favorite of his teachers and classmates, especially the Christian boys. The principal, a German priest named Wilhelm Windhausen, observed something unusual about the boy's personality. Father Windhausen developed a great affection for Merwan, which stirred envy in some of the other students. The gym coach also took a special liking to Merwan and gave the boy personal training in the gymnasium. Although Merwan was neither tall nor muscular, he was agile and a swift runner. His reflexes were exceptionally quick. The school had a large courtyard for athletic exercises and sports. Merwan excelled in long-distance running, high jumping, field hockey, and soccer, in which he also won many cups and medals. But his favorite game throughout his life was cricket. It was at St. Vincent's that Merwan joined the high school's cricket team and became an excellent wicketkeeper. He amazed the spectators by deftly catching the ball and sending the player out. Once a cricket match was arranged between the strong team of the New English School and St. Vincent's. The New English School was considered the favorite, since the team had won the trophy shield for many years in a row. The team members were usually seniors, but Merwan, though younger, played first string for St. Vincent's. The English school batted first and scored. Merwan then took the wickets of the three best players, and they did not score further. At bat, St. Vincent's team was making a poor showing, and their chances of winning looked dim. Then Merwan was up and remained batting until he hit the ball flying for the winning stroke. St. Vincent's School won the trophy shield. The home spectators were overjoyed, and the principal, teachers, students, and parents flocked to congratulate Merwan on his splendid play.
And the footnote says, while a student at St. Vincent's, Merwan set many school cricket records, which remained unbroken for years.
When photographs were taken of the winning team with the shield, all the boys insisted that Merwan sit beside it. Near St. Vincent's High School, an old Parsi couple served soft drinks from their small shop, which Merwan frequented with his friends. Each time he came...
Let me just read the
Oh,
sidebars.
go ahead.
Parsis are the descendants of those Persian Zoroastrians who fled Muslim religious persecution and emigrated to India in the 7th and 8th centuries. Iranis, such as Meher Baba's family, are descendants of those Persian Zoroastrians who fled to India in the late 19th and 20th centuries.
Each time he came, the proprietress would dole out sweets to him by the handful, and he would share them with his companions. Whenever the husband was present, however, he would prevent this by ordering the boys out of the shop. The kindly old woman, nevertheless, would let Merwan know that he and his friends could come around to the back door. She had a special affection for Merwan in particular. At St. Vincent's, Merwan ranked high in almost all his subjects, particularly Persian, which he loved. He liked history and literature, but he did not care much for geography, science, and his nemesis, mathematics. although he never failed in these subjects. One remarkable characteristic about the boy was that he possessed a sharp memory and would easily retain what he heard or read about. In fact, he was considered to be so intelligent that some thought he cheated during his exams.
Okay, honey bun,
One
thank
priest-
you. Let's thank you for the reading. Let's let Marion pick it up here and take us home. Not that much time left.
Okay, so tell me when to stop.
One
Okay.
priest.
What? No, I mean when to stop. Also, tell me when.
Okay. Yeah.
One priest who thought he was cheating caned him, but afterward admitted, "There is something different about you, Marwan, something special. Forgive me for beating you." "What is there to forgive?" replied Marwan. "It is all right. It was a mistake. It is forgiven and forgotten." For school, Marwan read the works of Sir Walter Scott, William Shakespeare, William Wordsworth, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and later John Donne. Marwan had a deep passion for poetry and would ask his father to read the Divan of Hafiz to him and explain its true meaning. Father and son would sit together until late in the night, as Shireen Mai castigated Marwan to go to bed. The boy would remember whatever poems Bobo read. Marwan never actually read the poetry of Hafiz himself, but only heard what was read to him in the original Persian by his father. Yet he was able to memorize the poems and quote Hafiz to the end of his life. More surprising was the fact that Marwan would recite verses from poetry that he had never read or heard, as if he had committed them to memory by reading them daily. Marwan knew the bhajans of the Hindu Sadgurus, Tukaram, and Swami Ramdas by heart, as well as the entire Bhagavad Gita and Ramayana.
Let me read the footnote. Tukaram lived 1608 to 1649, was a perfect master and a famous Marathi poet, whose abhangs, devotional songs, are still widely popular in Maharashtra. Swami Ramdas, 1608 to 1681, was another famous Maharashtrian poet saint, the guru of King Shivaji, and also one of the perfect masters of his age. And as you'll recall, Shivaji was a minor advent.
Marwan was also fond of quoting Rumi, although he had never read or heard his works either. In his spare time, he read books about different religions and spirituality, including the Gujarati writings of Sorabji Desai of Navsari. He did not like romance or love stories, but he did enjoy detective stories. He was a devoted reader of the British weekly magazine, The Union Jack, which featured the exploits of Sexton Blake. Sherlock Holmes was another favorite. Marwan saved old issues and circulated them among his friends, thus inculcating in them the habit of reading. Marwan once wrote a long letter to the author of the Sexton Blake stories, appreciating his work and wishing him a successful career.
Sidebar says there were many different writers creating the Sexton Blake stories at that time, and exactly which one Marwan wrote is not known.
Marwan also began writing articles in English and Gujarati, which were published in different Indian newspapers under the pen name of Huma.
Huma denotes the Persian phoenix, also called the bird of paradise.
Similarly, his poems, shairis, couplets, and ghazals written in English, Gujarati, Persian, Farsi, Urdu, and Hindi under the same pen name were greatly appreciated. With Marwan's permission, Bailey mailed one of Huma's Urdu ghazals to the popular Gujarati newspaper Sanj Vartaman, the Evening News of Bombay, which published it in its Saturday issue. Thereafter, every Saturday issue contained one of Huma's compositions or articles. Later, the Bombay Samachar, another Gujarati newspaper, also published some of Huma's compositions. The poetic themes were invariably spiritual, emphasizing virtues over vices and the forces of good over evil. His poems spoke of the mystical Sufi tavern or wine shop and described spiritual longing, divine madness, and God intoxication. Although still a teenager, Merwan possessed deep wisdom and insight.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Marian, let's hold it here.
Okay.
And I'm going to note where we stopped.
Yay.
That was beautiful. Wow.
That was so incredible.
Yeah, and it's written so well.
his
It's written so
childhood.
well.
Wow. I mean, I was blown away.
Did
I
we?
mean, you could just, he could be God just from there, the way he was at the time. Yeah, he was.
Amazing,
Yeah. I
amazing.
mean, you know, that's one thing I got into is Montessori, you know, teaching children. And he was just like, wow,
Yeah.
just a teacher's ideal. My God. Whoa.
Did we
I'm
start back a few pages from last week? Is that what happened?
Yeah, we
Oh,
did.
good.
We
Okay.
did. But now I wrote down that we got to page 139, and I will remember that next time.
Oh, I didn't